this is Gretchen Menn, the guitar player for Zepparella, and this is the third video in a three-part series on When the Levee Breaks. So the first video was on the riffs, the second video was on the solos, and this video is going to be on gear, structure, and special considerations for playing this song live. So let me actually talk you through my gear because I haven't spent any time doing that. So this is a 2003 Les Paul Standard. Unfortunately, I can't afford anything that is super and cool and vintage and vibey and a Les Paul. But this is great and I love this guitar. It has the slim 60s neck and I use Ernie Ball strings 10 through 52. So it's a light top, heavy bottom string, which are heavier than what Jimmy used, but that's what I like. And then I have a DiMarzio 36th anniversary PAFs, and I use DiMarzio cables. It's going into an exotic effects wah-wah pedal. It took me actually quite a while and a lot of trials and tribulations to find a wah-wah pedal that to me felt like the one that I had hijacked from my dad, which was like a mid-70s vintage crybaby wah-wah that I loved, and I played until it started screaming like banshees on stage one night in Reno, right in the middle of Dazed and Confused, which was maybe the worst song for it to do it in. And then I have that going into a Polytune tuner, and then into a Providence Silky Drive boost pedal, into a Providence Phase Force. All of those are go right into the amp, and the only thing I run in the effects loop is the chrono delay from Providence. I did try the Phase Force in the effects loop. I just prefer the way it sounds in front of the amp. And speaking of amps, this is a 2-Rock Bionics, which is a 100-watt amp, and it's into a 2-Rock 4x12 cabinet. I had always played my 1976 Marshall JMP, and I plugged into this 2-Rock, and it was like love at first chord, and I still have my JMP, I still love it, but this amp just to me, it felt right when I play it, and it has been incredibly reliable, and 2-Rock has been very good to me. So that's been my main gigging and recording amp for since 2013. The humble pick. This is a Dunlop Jazz 3. I've used Jazz 3s from day one. I've actually used Jazz 3s longer than I've played Les Pauls or any other piece of my gear. I think I just found out that Eric Johnson used them, and I was like, okay, I'm done, good enough for me. And actually, I love them. It feels right. I've got delicate hands and stuff, so a pick that's small for a lot of people might be normal size for me. So that's what I use. And for recording, I tend to love the Ultex. For playing live, I use these Max Grip, which I feel like we play always on stages that are so hot and sweaty. Or if they're not hot and sweaty, they're freezing. So either I need it because my fingers are numb or because they're sweaty. Let's go section by section, and I'll talk about what tones I'm using at what times. The main thing that I have going is always a very short delay, a 250 millisecond, which I have set on the chrono delay, and I can actually store that and switch between that and then a slightly longer delay, 450 milliseconds, that I use like for solos. So in that main riff, all I'm really using is that chrono delay and then the tone and the gain from the amp. The amp also has a spring reverb on there. I intentionally use a grittier tone than is recorded. And to me, this gets into just a really subjective area, and that's the one of tone. People are very quick to sling mud around tone, but I don't think anybody's ever dialed up a tone and they're like, ooh, can I get it to sound worse? Okay, awesome. Everybody's perception of tone is so unique and individual. And so the reason I go for a grittier tone, though, is there's some pieces of music where when I hear them, and I actually hear them like with headphones on the recording, I'm kind of shocked as to how clean it is. And this is one of those songs where when you really listen to the guitars, it's kind of shockingly clean. When I remember when the Levee breaks, I remember it just this crushing guitar riff. And I feel like if I were to dial my sound up to be as clean as what's on the album, it wouldn't have the same spirit. It wouldn't feel right to me. So go with what's right for you and for your ears. I'm just telling you what seems right for my ears. Now when we go to that section with the the chords with the slide. And then I click on the phase force. And then click it off for. And then click it back on. And then off. So it's a little bit of dancing on your pedal board if you want to do it that way. It sounds fine without the phaser too. To me, it sounds more correct if I put on the phaser. For the next section, that kind of bridge section with the chords, what I do there is I have on the longer delay, so the 450 millisecond, and the phaser. So that's. Then, for the solo, I step on my Providence boost. So that'll give you a little bit more sustain. So one of the trickiest spots in the song, the way that I do it, is the very end of the solo. So I've got my delay set to the 450 milliseconds. I've got my phase on. I've got my boost on. I've got my pick in my finger here. And I'm hitting that last note, the F. So that's E flat F. And that's your last note before you're going back into the riff where you have to change how you hold your pick, turn off your boost, turn off your phase, turn your delay to the shorter tempo, and be ready to. So it all happens in a split second. And so that's pretty much it. Same thing for the second solo with the pedal settings. Like I said, not a lot of pedals, but a little bit of dancing you have to do on them. So why do I play this in standard tuning? It's really for practical reasons. I do have a Dan Electro. That's what I used to record it for the video that we did. But that Dan Electro is tuned for the song In My Time of Dying. And a lot of guitars don't even like to hold one tuning, much less have it, be retuned throughout the course of the night, and the Dan Electro is no exception. So I reserved that guitar for In My Time of Dying, and I just play when the Levee breaks on the Les Paul. Because the action of this guitar is set up for normal playing. It's not as high as would be ideal for playing slide. What that means is that if you go to that open tuning, everything's down a full step except your high E string, which is down a third. Meaning not only am I playing with action that is not great for slide, but now I'm loosening the strings. So everything is going to be just floppy and fretting out, so it's really not going to work. So I found it just easier to learn it in standard tuning, play it in standard tuning, and have done it ever since. I've played Led Zeppelin now for quite a few years, and I've played it with a number of different people, and I think the most frequent misconception people make is, oh, it's just rock. And a riff can be maybe not a super technical riff, or the overall feel of the song can be something that seems accessible, but my experience in Led Zeppelin is take nothing for granted. And this is the perfect example of a song that if I were to sit down and play it with even musicians I would gladly take lessons from, I'd be pretty surprised if they really, really knew the structure of this song. So I'm going to take you through my chart of it. I encourage you to make your own, but here it is. The song starts with 22 measures, and I'll show you in a minute how I count this. It's a one measure phrase, that short riff that I showed you in the first video. That happens 4 times. Then you go into what I call the form, which is 18 measures. And the way that is you have the long riff, so the 2 measure phrase 3 times, punctuated by a 1 measure phrase. And that whole thing repeats. So it's kind of like a 7 plus 7 measures. And then you have the chords with the slide that happens 2 times. Then you have a rest of 1 measure, and I'll tell you in a minute how we count that. Then we have a verse, both 1 and 2, which is over the form, which is that 2 measure phrase 3 times plus the 1 measure phrase, and then the whole thing repeating. Then we go into the bridge and the slide solo, and then we have the harmonica solo, the second one, over the form. Another 1 measure rest, verses 3 and 4 over the form, but note that the vocal enters later on the fourth verse, which is actually really cool because it sits differently with the guitar riff. Then we go into the second slide solo, an outro, which is 5 repeats of the 2-measure riff, a big drum fill, then 8 of the 1-measure riff, and then a big drum fill, then 3.5 of the 1-measure riff, and you end on the and of 2 of the fourth riff with a slide up to the E flat, and then sort of chords as you feel them. Actually, I realized that I didn't show this on the other video, so I'll show it now, just because it's something that happens only one time. Basically, you slide up to this, this E flat, and then going between that double stop on the first fret of the D and the G, and then the third fret on the A and the D string. So it's just... Okay, so let me talk about those 1-measure breaks. Crying won't help ya, playing won't do you no good. The reason that they can be trickier than they seem is because it's at a very slow tempo, and the vocal has to enter before the drums do. So the vocal enters on the and of 4, and it has to be right with a if it, and everybody has to agree that keeps happens on that one. So the way that we do it is I look back at Clementine's foot, her hi-hat foot, and I watch where she's feeling that tempo. And then I tap along with her, and then on that and of 4 I put my guitar neck up, and this is also Anna can see it. I put the guitar neck up so then she can go if it keeps, and then we're all on the 1 together. Thank you guys so much for checking this out. I hope it's helpful. I hope you enjoy it. If there's anything you want to see differently in the future, leave it in the comments below. All of the girls in Zepparella and I are doing these as a way of sharing what we love, improving our skills. There's nothing like having to go extra deep to teach it and make sure you're going to be held accountable, which social media always holds you accountable. So enjoy. Thank you so very much.